Hello and welcome. I see that we have our participant list steadily growing. I see 38, 39, 40. Very exciting to have you with us. We're going to get underway in just a moment, but we'll give ourselves a little time for other attendees to arrive. Okay, so thank you so much for arriving. I see that our attendees have our numbers have started to level off, and our webinar is now streaming live on Facebook. Hello, welcome. My name is Josh Noble, and I am the chair of Canada's Emerging Cooperators, as well as the manager of deposit support at Synergy Credit Union. And we're so glad that you're with us today for this discussion on passing the torch, propelling co-ops forward. Where we're going to chat today a little bit about the role and place for youth and for a intergenerational cooperative space. And I'm really excited to have a number of really excellent, talented, insightful, and committed co-op leaders. And so to start off, we're going to begin by meeting those leaders. I'm going to just ask that we do it in the order that I'm seeing it on my screen. I don't know if people are seeing it on their screen in the same order. I'm going to ask that each of our panelists introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about yourself, your co-op involvement, and anything else that's going to be really critical to know, the organization that you represent. So I have Tim first up. So Tim, I'm going to ask you to go first.
Thanks, Josh, and hello everyone. Great to be here today. My name is Tim Ross. I'm the Executive Director of the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada. Our mission is to inspire, represent, and serve housing cooperatives from coast to coast to coast, where 250,000 people call home. And I'm also on the board of Co-ops and Mutuals Canada, and really looking forward to the discussion today. No surprise, I'm going to talk a lot about housing as a key issue. So that's what I'll be bringing to the conversation today. Thanks, Josh.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tim. Okay, so next I'm going to go to Erin.
Hi, everyone. It's Erin here from Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I will say Canada too, because I see a number of international folks in the participant list too, which is exciting to see. So I'm proud that my main hustle, the big hat that I wear, is with the International Center for Co-op Management out of the Sobey School of Business at St. Mary's University. And we do education, international education on the cooperative business model, the co-op sector, governance and management. And we're known for our Co-op Masters program online. But I did want to share a visual here, a little show and tell. This is a bear that I've had since I was 4 years old that says, "I love you, co-op." And just hearkening back to getting exposed to the co-op model as a young person, and acknowledging that in all the co-op pieces of my trajectory over the years, I've had some really amazing mentors and inspiring people who have helped me to want to be even more involved. So some of my other hats right now, I serve on the board for the Bus Stop Theatre Co-op here in Halifax. I serve on the Community Housing Management Network Association board, or cooperative board. I'm, as of last week, on the board of Inova Credit Union. I volunteer with the Association of Co-op Educators and their free online portal at ed.coop. And I'm an advisor to the World Credit Union Young Professionals Network. And I've done on my master's program, I focused on the policy context for cooperative development and have now completed a certificate in co-op management as well. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks so much, Erin. That's wonderful. Okay, next, Eva, I'll go to you.
Hey everyone, my name is Eva. I'm the Co-op Education Coordinator with the BC Cooperative Association. And I guess I got into the cooperative sector through forming a worker cooperative with a group of friends out of university. So that was kind of how I entered into the cooperative sector. And I also have my own kind of cooperative startup that I'm working on called Buddy Up, as well as studying in the Masters of Management at St. Mary's University as well. So co-ops for life, definitely. And my apologies, I had my time slot booked like in a different, I guess the time zone I didn't quite catch, so I can only stay for about half an hour today. So apologies, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us, Eva. I really appreciate it. I'm also going to introduce Sarah Jensen. Sarah's one of our organizers, and Sarah will be jumping in for a little bit of the conversation as well. So, Sarah, would you mind to just give a brief introduction?
Sure, yeah. So since Eva unexpectedly is going to have to leave a little bit early and we're going to miss her a lot, I'm going to be jumping in today. It wasn't super planned, so unfortunately I don't have a slide for myself on the PowerPoint presentation. But yeah, I'm Sarah Jensen. I'm the chair of the Congress Committee for Canada's Emerging Cooperators. I'm also on the Ontario Council for the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada as the Northern Ontario representative. I grew up in a housing co-op, so co-ops are really, really important to me. I see them as a place to build community, to address social issues, and just to be, you know, better humans and building a better world. And I'm really excited to be here today. I helped organize this along with CEC for the last couple of months and along with our wonderful panelists. And I can speak to how wonderful all our panelists are. So without further ado, we'll get started.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm just noting the comments, the wide representation that we have globally, which is very exciting. Hello to friends in Missouri, Vancouver, Morocco, Oregon, Trinidad and Tobago, Ottawa, Newfoundland, BC, just all over. So welcome. So glad that you're with us today. I will note there is, if you look on the bottom, you'll see an interpretation button for anyone who's looking for interpretation to French. And so that just want to be sure that that resource is noted. Also had wanted to let you know that we're going to have a little poll to get a little bit of sense of who's here. And I'll ask Sarah, if you have the opportunity, if you could pull that up. So you're going to see a few questions, just so we know a little bit about yourself. And if you have a chance to just fill it out right now, your age, experience in the co-op sector, what you're looking for from this webinar, and then that's going to be informing sort of the start of our webinar, and then 4 and 5, what attracted you to the co-op movement, and what have you done to gain experience if you are or when you were a young or emerging leader. Should be sort of informative for later in the webinar. So I'm assuming that those are being filled out currently. I'll just wait for Sarah's blessing that we're through it.
We have about half of our participants have voted so far.
Okay, give it a little more time.
I don't have
a prop as good as Aaron for today. I'm sort of like looking around and I've got my credit union face mask, but that's not quite as endearing. I mean, maybe this will stick with me as long as her bear, but I kind of hope not. I do hope that everyone is managing through COVID well. I know that it's been a challenging seasons globally. So how are we coming along, Sarah?
I'm gonna give it about 10 more seconds. We've got, I think, 12 more people to vote. So if you're one of the 12 that haven't voted, go ahead and do that. Alrighty. So I'm just gonna finish off polling now, and then I'll publish the results. So, are you guys able to see the results now? Yeah, okay. So you can see that the age group that we have here, with over 50% of the people who voted who are here today, are between 35 and 65. We've got quite a few 25 to 35s and a few 65 pluses, which makes me in a small minority. I'm 18 to 25. And then so what's your co-op sector experience? We can see that most of us have extensive experience in the sector. Some of us are emerging leaders. About 30% are emerging leaders and 19% are new to the sector. In terms of what people want to gain from the webinar, we're seeing our top choices as learn about issues important to young and emerging leaders in the co-op sector, how my organization can better support young and emerging co-op leaders, and how can I support young people, emerging leaders in the co-op sector as an experienced individual. And then for what attracted you to the co-op movement as a young and or emerging cooperator, it seems like the vast majority of you said the co-op principles and values and how they differentiate us from the corporate sector. As well as a desire to see co-ops be a solution to social justice. And then as a younger emerging leader, what did you do to gain experience and involvement in the sector? A lot of people said seek out educational material. And the second most popular was participate in co-op education, advocacy, and lobbying work. So that's pretty awesome. Thanks so much for everyone who participated. I really love seeing these results.
Excellent. And hopefully for our panelists, that helps contextualize the audience. It's always a challenge I found with the digital first world, that we can't kind of just get that sense easily of who we're talking to, but it's a really helpful tool. So we'll jump into some of these questions, and we'll start off with how can we raise the profile of the co-op sector and introduce it to the next generation of young leaders? I think that the idea of translating and transmitting these values down, that there is a market sort of reason for co-ops. There's a market proposition. But it's not just a market proposition. We actually need people who kind of get the co-op in their gut, in their values, in their DNA. And so how do we go about transmitting the values as opposed to just sort of the market proposition? Although I obviously recognize that both are important. So I don't think that we need to have a particular order for this. We'll just toss it out to the group and whoever would like to speak to it. Well, if no one's going to speak to it, I'll call on Erin first.
Okay, great. I think this is, and I'm not surprised to see such a big group of folks here today, and even folks who are more senior in their career, because I think that we circled around these questions a lot. And I think it's a genuine curiosity and effort that folks not only want to ensure that a really important part of our population are included meaningfully in co-ops, but also that we build our succession plan for the whole co-op economy in a way that's going to mean that there is a thriving future. and not just sort of a burning out of the flames that some of the amazing leaders of today are really burning strong. So in terms of raising the profile of co-ops, I have a number of ideas, and I think I'll start with a couple of concepts that hopefully resonate with people. And the first is belonging as being one of the most foundational human needs that there is. And the fact that co-ops truly do offer this unique way to engage in the world and the economy that can potentially deliver on that if we do it well. And so, you know, to harken back to a 20-year-old reference, I think at this point, but thinking about like the concept of bowling alone and Robert Putnam and these ideas where less and less are we as a society gathering in groups and having affiliations and associations, and we're a lot more sort of at the individual or the family unit in terms of how we go about life, especially as we have more people working from home and that kind of thing. We don't have it as baked into our society that we are working in a group type of belonging type of scenario. So as a cooperative model, there is that opportunity that we create a space where people feel like they're doing more than just buying milk at the grocery store. They're actually part of something that they co-own and participate in and have a say in. And I think there's a lot of different ways that we go about delivering on that feeling of belonging. But we should at least be asking asking ourselves the question, are we creating that within the cooperatives that we organize? And I think that in the space of consumer cooperation the most, because I feel like that's under attack from market forces more in terms of how do we differentiate ourselves in that space so that people aren't forced to interact with us on the basis of price or quality and that type of thing. We should do those things well, but we should definitely be doing more than that in differentiating ourselves as a democratic institution in society. And so that meaningful engagement, that they meaningfully belong to something, I think we need to optimize. Does it feel more than just being a part of a non-co-op or shopping at a non-co-op? I will raise another thing, which is intersectionality. And I think people need to see themselves in our cooperative organizations. And if they're not seeing themselves in the staff, in the board and leadership and governance, and even in the marketing materials, then they're not going to necessarily see that they can be and should be and are invited to be part of our organizations. And I mention intersectionality because I feel like when we think of youth, something comes to mind. For every single one of us on the call today, there's an image that comes to mind. Is it a young white person with a college education looking for a job? I feel like that might be for a lot of people what comes to mind. But you know, we need to think that people come from different family situations. They come from different economic backgrounds, education backgrounds with different skill sets. I know some of you, of course, are already thinking in these ways, but I challenge myself on this a lot because we have that sort of default thinking like, oh, a young person is like I was when I was young, instead of thinking, well, that can look a lot of different ways. So I think how that shows up in who is in our organization already and who we invite to be part of it is really critical. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Erin. Just to build on the belonging and intersectionality, I think what I would also want to focus on in terms of raising the profile of the sector and introducing it to the next generation. I think we need to be responsive to the real and practical needs of younger people in society. And let's back this up with a little bit of public opinion polling data that was just released today or yesterday by Abacus. Abacus also did a good study about co-ops in Canada a few months ago. But here's what Abacus had to say this week. 50% of younger people say the pandemic has exposed pre-existing inequality. Younger people want a comprehensive recovery policy that focuses on those in greatest need, providing long-term solutions that not only address the consequences of the pandemic, but pre-existing inequality as well. And among the top 3 issues that younger people want us and decision makers to focus on is to address the issue of affordable housing. So there is a fundamental threat in our society around inequality and the climate crisis, and we need to work on and we need to offer practical, attainable responses to this twin crises in order to demonstrate relevance and demonstrate that the cooperative movement is a place where you belong.
Hey, can I add to the conversation?
Please do.
Thank you. I would like to add, I think, on both points with an example of a cooperative, or actually it's a hub or a network of cooperatives that I think captures a lot of this really well, and that's solid state community industries. I think I don't know if anyone's on the call from there, but hey, if you are, I think solid state's model is exactly about like creating this almost like familial bonds for youth. Solid state primarily works with like racialized youth from like migrant families, immigrant youth that are like new to Canada. So I think their approach is taking a period of life which can be very hard and disorienting for a lot of people, and creating like using cooperatives as a tool to bring youth together, primarily like in almost like a familial way, like building those bonds based on like sharing common values and having conversations around the kind of things that youth do care about or are anxious about. Like I think we have grown up in a world that is kind of like in the midst of collapse. So I think that that study is really interesting because I think it shows that the values of youth are aligned with kind of this understanding that the system needs to change and that there are alternatives. And so I think those are very salient to youth. For me, in my cooperative experience, that was really something that drew me to the cooperative sector, was that I almost had like a little family in my group of friends that we were. So I think something that does bring those together is like definitely taking more of that like community approach where we use co-ops as like tools to bring youth together in that way. I think that model, Solid State, is really, really cool. So check it out if you haven't heard of them.
Okay. Appreciate those insights. I think that I hear a real theme around belonging and Bowling Alone and Putnam's research around social capital informed my graduate diploma research at St. Mary's. So I really appreciate that perspective. I think that part of what drives social alienation is certainly the economic systems that exist, that we are sort of in some larger systems driven towards fragmentation and individuality, et cetera. But there's other forces at work as well. Technology is one that obviously comes to mind, but there are others. When I think about the size of the belonging challenge of isolation, loneliness, alienation, do co-ops need can co-ops do it on their own, I guess is my thought, or do we exist as sort of a part of a larger narrative or challenge to this theme? And so I'm not sure who wants to touch on that. I'll ask that just one participant answer, because I don't want to railroad us too far away from the other questions we have.
Oh, I'm happy to jump in. If you just look, I mean, I feel like the principles get a lot of play if we're talking about the foundations of co-ops. But if you look at our value of solidarity, I feel like that's a call to action to say that is baked into our DNA as cooperatives. And so we should be leading, people should be wanting to copy us. I feel like I'd like to say that the whole corporate social responsibility movement were ideas borrowed from co-ops that they've internalized as part of their normal practice. And so I'd like to say that we can keep leading by example and letting other people want to mimic what we're doing as folks who not only bring people together in a space of belonging, but also look critically and be conscious about making sure that all people are truly included in a meaningful way.
Okay, thank you so much, Erin. I'm going to, my apologies, I flipped our question. So you may be wondering if I was going to ask this question, not panelists, but I will now. How is your organization involving youth and creating support for the next generation of young leaders?
Well, I'll jump in, I guess, a couple ways. I could speak first about what our movement's doing, and not what the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada can take all the credit for, because there's a lot of committed community leadership involved in our success. But one of the most tangible ways our movement supports the development of young leadership is having a safe and affordable place to call home in a cooperative, in a housing cooperative. So, cooperatives in Canada, there's more than there's a 250,000 people living in housing cooperatives in Canada. They operate on a not-for-profit continuing basis, so that the rent structure or the housing charges cover the cost of operation, and every dollar that's raised in revenue in the housing co-op, it gets reinvested into the quality of life of the community's needs today and for the future. So that's number one. Number two, particularly within the context of our organization, given demographic shifts that are happening in the workplace, we've been experiencing quite a few retirements in our organization. We've got a team of 33 people across the country, and one of the ways that we're supporting and creating the next generation of young leaders within our cooperative is to offer good paying jobs and real opportunities within the organization. Another way is mentorship. A number of my team members participate in different formalized and informal mentorship programs to provide mentorship and sponsorship opportunities within our sector. We also have a diversity scholarship program that contributes to post-secondary education among young people who have grown up in housing cooperatives all across the country. And we know how difficult it is to manage student debt. Accessing post-secondary education can be a significant barrier for many people. And so contribution of a scholarship can certainly help. We also have a young members network within our organization, so that younger members living in housing cooperatives can caucus together. And as well, within the context of housing cooperatives and regional and national federations, we always, there are tangible pathways to leadership through participating and getting elected to boards of directors of housing co-ops, regional federations, and the national federation. Sarah already mentioned that she's on the Ontario Council at CHF Canada. So so if you're on the board of CHF Canada, you're developing a lot of good leadership experience, overseeing a pretty large membership association. So those are some of the ways in which we support the development of leadership and opportunity. But I think it really comes down to making sure that we offer really good quality jobs, pathways to education and a good affordable place to call home that's inclusive and supported by a strong community.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Tim. I mean, I think you did well to cover what's happening in the broader scheme of what we're all doing in co-ops. And I would add to stability and security moving forward, like the role of credit unions and other institutions that help people to build their, personal stability and safety too, that co-ops definitely deliver on. So then I'll speak to St. Mary's and what we're doing. Within our International Center of Co-op Management, our focus is on helping people build fluency in the cooperative model, which, believe it or not, seems elusive to so many people, even folks who have been decades being great contributors in the co-op sector who have gone through our education have said, wow, there are things that I hadn't considered or framed that way before. So I feel really happy and proud to be part of this kind of institution. So we do education for young folks and all through their learning journey for everyone on all in all age brackets, I suppose. And so we do online master's, grad diploma, certificate, and executive education. Now we're doing online too. And so these are ways that we help people to understand the complexity of the co-op model so that they can then look at how do we manage, govern, and operationalize what is uniquely cooperative in terms of our values, principles, what democratic means within the context of the economy and business. And those things that I feel like are often blocks for people because it's too much to try to integrate and thinking, okay, so what does success look like? How do I manage toward that when it's not just serving one bottom line? And so I think that's a big part in helping people see the opportunity of the co-op model and to be able to build their careers and get excited and feel confident in taking leadership in the co-op sector too. So that's how we do that. And I think the other part of that is we give folks access to seeing themselves as part of a global community and wanting to then have the hunger to get more involved in that global community and contribute, and being part of a network of keen and smart alumni and partners as well. I see on the line today Tara Williams, the chair and president of our alumni group, who is certainly exemplifies that kind of young energy, who is bringing people together and continuing these conversations of how do we continually evolve the cooperative model and how we execute on that. Go ahead, Sarah.
Alrighty, I'm going to jump in since Eva had to leave a little early. We're sad to see her go. Yeah, I think it depends what hat I wear. Like Tim said, I'm a part of the CHF Canada Ontario Council, and it's great to see youth involvement there. I think Lindsay Reed just said something in the chat. She's along with Cameron, one of the great emerging leaders running CHF Canada's youth involvement network, which I'm a part of. Of course, being a young person sitting on their board is a huge opportunity, and youth involvement is something that I'm really passionate about through that. Another one of the hats I wear is I'm the youth engagement coordinator with the Ontario Cooperative Association. So you can imagine I do a lot of work with youth, especially very young youth, which I think aren't targeted as much in the co-op sector, youth between the ages of 14 to 18. And I think has given me a very unique perspective. I got involved as a 14-year-old in my housing co-op, doing work on a committee, and then chairing that committee, and then really being involved with the Cooperative Young Leaders Program with the Ontario Cooperative Association. And I think that, getting young, like very young youth interested in the co-op movement is sort of an underutilized resource. And I think that it's a really great way to get them involved. I think for sure, like for me, I grew up in housing co-op with this really deep sense of community, which I think Tim kind of hit on in his discussion. But I think that there's a lot of youth these days, particularly younger millennials like myself and Gen Z, who see a lot of the issues in the world and don't feel that they have a lot of agency to change those issues. And that the greatest way to support youth in our organizations to get involved is to show them that co-ops are a way to address those issues, the issues that they see in their own communities, the issues that they see in their own lives. and sort of building on the last question, to address those inequalities, to address those inequities, to build inclusion and intersectionality into everyday life. And I've seen kids, particularly through my work with the Cooperative Young Leaders program, say to me at the end of a week learning about co-ops, I didn't know that this is a solution. I didn't know that I could be part of the change. And I think that that is really what draws young people to the sector. I think that that is really how our organizations can leverage youth, because we have a lot of ideas about how we can make Canada and the rest of the world a better place, how we can make the co-op movement work for us in that regard. And I think that it's super exciting to see that youth involvement really take off in that direction.
I think one theme that particularly I heard generally, but maybe I'll key in, is part of how we involve youth is we solve problems for youth. So what we have
Josh,
going
I
on
think you're
that matters.
cutting out a bit.
Oh, apologies. Am I coming through okay?
That's better now. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Aaron. That we don't just sort of say, this is what we're doing, getting like, this is what you become part of what we're doing. This is relevant to you. These are challenges that you have on, and we have solutions for them. Is that fair, Tim?
You're still cutting out a little bit, Josh.
Okay. I will see if I can do anything to improve that. Maybe let's go to the next question while I try and troubleshoot. So, Sarah, can you push forward to the next slide? Thank you so much. So yeah, to attract millennials, post-millennials, Gen Z, Alpha, I think is the babies being born now. Are today's cooperatives promoting enough of the foundational principles at the origin of the co-op movement? Are we being sort of radical in the sense of back to the root enough in our approach?
I've been going first, but I don't have to go first every time, but I am unmuted. So so I'll jump in here. I think a couple things that I'd want to highlight here. I think there's a greater diversity of worldviews, cultures, and faith traditions across the globe that I think it might be a bit too far for us to suggest that the Rochdale pioneers had it all figured out and we should ascribe the co-op values to that group, and we're trying to live with that same constitution. I think so I maybe just start by saying that we need to the what we're calling these common set of principles and values have, I think, maybe broader origins, and we shouldn't take credit for these, that they may be shared among broader backgrounds, cultures, and faith traditions. And to go back to to be attractive to millennials, post-millennials, and Gen Z, are we promoting enough principles and values at the origin of the co-op movement? I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. Principles and values are really important to have, but they're really useless if they're not backed up by concrete actions. And I think actions speak louder than words. And as a movement and as a sector, we need to offer practical ways of addressing the needs and aspirations of younger people. And for me, that comes back to really three key areas that I think we needed to challenge ourselves to do better on. One is healthy jobs, pay equity, better than living wages, group benefits, and group pensions. As employers, cooperatives need to demonstrate their commitment and advancement of greater diversity, equity, and inclusion in policies and practices in the workplace. So we need healthy and good jobs. The second is healthy housing. We have massive housing inequality in Canada and around the world due to an over-reliance on private home ownership and the financialization of housing and decades of divestment in community and social housing in Canada, including cooperatives. Decades of stagnant wages, high student debts, poor job prospects make it harder and harder to find and keep a good place to live. So as a movement, one of our best ways to be attractive to millennials, post-millennials, and Gen Z is to use our economic power to invest in more equitable forms of housing, such as not-for-profit housing and cooperatives in Canada, and to use our political voice to advocate for the right to adequate housing in Canada and around the world. The third area that I think if we're to be attractive and relevant is to make sure that we are doing concrete things to promote a healthy environment. We must recognize that we're facing a climate crisis, and this means that we must demonstrate our commitment to mitigating climate change through real action, decarbonizing the economy, supporting energy efficiency and renewable energy. So, and if we combine these concrete, relevant, and absolutely vital actions with the cooperative principles, then we can be relevant. But the principles on their own aren't enough. They need to be backed by concrete action and commitments by our movement to be relevant and useful. And that's all I have to say about that for now.
Wow, that was great. I was going to make the point earlier that even though Tim and I did the same undergraduate degree, and in a lot of ways we have, similar enough backgrounds, there's still a lot that's different. But yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. To break down the question for a moment, I think the more important part than are we communicating the principles and the values? Are we letting people know about those? Are we educating about those and so forth? I think that the bigger question is, are we living them? Do they show up in how we actually do business and we actually run our organizations? And if we're not being different, I don't think the way to spend our time is trying to look different and trying to communicate that we're different and spend money on a bunch of really nice images that we can put out there to try to make it look like we are a certain way. I think the harder work and the work that maybe goes a little bit more unnoticed but is felt is that we actually do the work of inclusion. We do the work of addressing our impact on the community and actually take responsibility for what we're doing in our communities. And a lot of folks are doing a lot of really good work, providing a lot of really essential services and products and great engagement with folks and communities, and Tim named a number of those. And so I want to acknowledge what's good about what we're already doing. And as someone who's been traditionally a cheerleader in the movement, I want to also say it is a time for us to be self-critical, to say, we are living on a planet where in many ways, and it's disheartening to acknowledge, but it's also reality. We're living in a time where our activity as human beings is really overshooting the planetary boundaries in many respects and using up resources that aren't as quickly replenished or not at all. And so to acknowledge that this is a time we live in, that should be a clear call to action. I'd like to see us be the folks that bring hope to people, saying there is a different way to do it. It's living among us. It's happening right now, and it has been happening for generations. And we will continue to hold our own feet to the fire to make sure that we keep doing business in a way that we are part of the solution and not the problem. And that we start incentivizing ourselves. This is at the board level, at the management level, in all aspects of what we do, that we create metrics that actually mean success in the way that we mean it. and that we stop borrowing this idea of success and this idea of financial health and wealth from non-co-op lenses, because these things aren't serving us well. They're driving us in different directions that are not resonating, I think, with any generation right now. And so if we're saying success is this and we're running in the wrong direction, then, you know, that's not necessarily living our values and principles. And so I say that the hard work of living those is really being able to break that down and build it into how we incentivize within our organizations what we call good, and how we put resources, time, energy, money toward really showing that those are truly what we value. And I congratulate everybody on the line who's thinking in those ways and acting in those ways. And for folks who feel like their reaction to what I'm saying is that's going to drive us into the hole, there's no way that that can be sustainable. Well, let's face it. You know, right now, what we're doing is not sustainable. Maybe it's short-term financially sustainable, but we have to think of another way. And I know co-ops have done it and will do it. So I'll leave it at that. But I think in terms of resonating with people entering into the co-op system or noticing the co-op system, what Sarah said before about having the ability to be part of the change, part of the solution, part of a winning team, I think that is, bar none, the most attractive thing that people want to do, a meaningful way to spend the hours of their life. Check.
Wow, it's hard to follow up on those two amazing discussions on what this really means to us. I wholeheartedly agree with both of you. I think as a very young person, like I'm 22, I don't think I know anyone in my social circle who isn't hyper aware of the social issues going on today, who isn't, you know, vegetarian or vegan for sustainability reasons, who isn't, you know, looking into zero waste, looking into, you know, intersectionality, looking into diversity and how we can address these issues. And I think the greatest thing that I've taken out of sort of this discussion as it's happened is that, like, we can't have economic sustainability without having social sustainability as well. And I think that that's sort of what the co-op movement really serves to address. I know for myself as a young person, that's really what you know makes me passionate about the co-op movement. It's what makes me interested. It's that you know, I can work a job where I'm able to look after my own self, but I'm also making the world you know, a better place for other people as well. I'm addressing those issues of wealth inequality, of social inequality, of racial injustice in my everyday work. And I think as a movement, we need to work even harder for those goals, because the work is never done, of course, in those things. And in being able to be sustainable, in being able to address these inequalities, we'll have a stronger movement, and we have a stronger economy because of it. Like, there's a reason that co-ops are more likely to be successful as businesses than the traditional corporate business in the first few years after they open. And that's because we have the power of people behind us. We have the ability to create these really strong, diverse communities that address these inequalities that weaken the outside system. I would also like to speak to the fact too that as a, you know, younger millennial / Gen Z cusp person, that it's a huge privilege that I get to do the volunteer work that I get to do in the co-op sector. And if we're going to really look at addressing inequalities in the co-op sector, we need to start looking at how we can employ more young people in the sector, how we can get them paying jobs, get them paid internships so that they can be involved regardless of their economic status, and all of the stuff that intersectional stuff that goes into wealth inequality in Canada. And I totally agree as well with the sentiment that it's about our actions, it's not about our words. I think that as a young person, I see more action in these spheres in the co-op sector. I think we've had tons of concrete examples of them in the chat today. I do think that we need more, always more. And I think that that's something that we're striving for every single day, is to have more action. But I totally agree with the sentiment that I believe Aaron said, that and Tim said as well, that like it is our actions It's what we do in the co-op sector as organizations and as individual cooperators that really makes the mark and shows our younger generation that this is really what we're about. It's not about us marketing ourselves as being, having all these great principles and values. It's about what we do. So here's to doing more of that.
Thanks for those answers. That's very comprehensive. I think that we're touching on this question of values and principles, but I want to drill down a little bit on it. So we have increasingly a rise of socially conscious consumers, and it's not total. There are certainly people who hold different social values, let's say, or people who have a stated social value and then a revealed social value in terms of the way they spend their time in dollars. But I think that it would be, I think you'd be hard pressed to say that we haven't seen a rise of a growing socially conscious consumer generally over the last couple of decades. It can be overstated, but I think that to say that there has been no growth would just be untenable. They're just, I would argue that there is. And so how do co-ops attract that generation of leaders? And I would even say consumers, followers. We need those people who are going to be 100% in, but you also need those people who are just 20% in. How do we capture some of those folks who have a social conscious reason for their purchasing and their time investments?
Make it easy. If we are creating a standard that in all of our activities we are going to hold ourselves to a certain standard, and folks can just know that the co-op brand or the co-op name or the co-op organization means a good thing, and they can rely on that and trust on that, then it's nice as a consumer to know my job is really easy. I'll show up in these spaces. That's where I'll spend my money and my time, what I'll care about, what I'll promote, what I'll share on social media, and what I want to be involved in terms of volunteering and leadership. Then, that's a reliable thing that we can be known for. I think that we took a hit that feels almost personal recently with MEC in Canada. In terms of our largest retailing cooperative really going quite south really quickly without the consultation of members. I'll say it that way just as a shorthand for those on the line who haven't been following it. There's a lot more to unpack there, but I think that something like that really does give us a call to action as cooperatives to say, if that's the impression, the big frontline national newspaper impression that people have of cooperatives, we all have some work to do in letting people know and in living it out in such a way that they truly believe that that was an anomaly. That's not what co-ops are. That's not what you can count on co-ops for. They are something that you, without having to even dig that deep, should be able to know and trust. These are actors in the economy that I want to support. And so I think it is holding ourselves to certain standards, and that means being conscious about if it's a consumer co-op, for example, that we're looking at things like fair trade, small producers, single source, all of the things that really do showcase a care for the human person, a value of human dignity. And I think that that's a big thing that I would boil the value of co-ops down to, is that we as a business model are built to serve human dignity. And that's in meaningful work, in safe housing, in the folks at the foundation of the value chain that give us our coffee every day, that we care about their lives too. So I'd say make it easy in those ways. See how easy that is? Did I make it sound easy?
Simple. It's so simple. Thanks, Aaron. Sarah or Tim? Apologies. Go ahead.
Sarah, go ahead.
Okie dokie. Yeah, I think for sure, like I said already, like I know a lot of young people are really drawn to the socially conscious consumer model much more than sort of the, I don't want to say older generation, but the more traditional model of just consumer rather than socially conscious consumer. So I think definitely if we address that, then we're going to see a lot more youth interested in the co-op model. All that said, though, I think that it's important for us as cooperators to really remember sort of what Aaron's saying, that like it's important for us to remember that we're socially conscious first and foremost, and that's what makes us competitive in the market. I think we can all think of examples of co-ops that, you know, maybe looked a little bit too much like the traditional corporate model and got away from the you know, values and principles and people-based approach, and that was part of their downfall. And I think as well that it's a really good point as too. I saw in the chat that when a co-op fails, it seems that the whole model is blamed, rather than like a traditional corporate business where the corporate business fails and it's just like, oh, it's just one business. So I think we have to be very conscious of that as a movement and as a sector, that you know, each of our co-ops is very important. I think that that's very cooperative in and of itself. You know, like as a part of CMC, Canada's Emerging Cooperators, we have a lot of different people on our committee from different co-ops, and we support each other. We support other businesses in the sector. We support other you know, sectors, like the housing co-op sector supports the retail sector, supports the education sector, and so on. And so I think that that sort of interconnectivity of the co-op movement and the co-op sector is what makes us strong, and we have to really rely on that when, you know, marketing ourselves, but also just existing as co-ops in the greater sector and in Canada, because I think that that's the only way that the sector gets strengthened, and that is something that's going to attract youth when they look at our model as something that they want to consume products or consume, you know, even like if you want to look at the housing market, consume housing from, that it's youth are looking for a model that provides that interconnectivity, provides that human factor, and that's what the co-op movement has to really focus on providing for them.
Both really great insights there. I'm going to, not surprisingly, talk a little bit more about housing. So this question is about, you know, demands of socially conscious consumers, but let's look at the consumer segment that we're talking about, younger people. Younger consumers have less and less disposable income because housing is becoming more and more expensive and less attainable. When you add student debt, the high cost of childcare, and inadequate public transport or affordable public transportation in a lot of places, there's not a heck of a lot of disposable income left to go out and be that socially conscious consumer. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we may need to work on tackling these really big issues together. I mentioned transportation, childcare, and housing. I'm going to focus on housing. You know, many people are asking the question, where am I going to live? What happens if my rent increases? Am I ever going to be able to move out of mom and dad's house? The current housing system is really untenable. And the difference between the current housing market, the cost of housing, and wage conditions are quite dramatic. Canada's Crown Corporation, the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, has a goal to ensure that everyone in Canada has access to a home that meets their needs and they can afford by 2030, which is fantastic. That's really good, considering over the past 30 years, up until just recently, the federal government was playing less and less a role into ensuring that everyone has a safe, affordable place to call home. But there's some very challenging math at play here, and I'm borrowing these points from UBC's Generation Squeeze that talks a lot about issues facing younger Canadians. Average home, in order to meet that goal of ending housing need in Canada by 2030, there's some challenging math. Average home prices in Canada would need to drop by about $223,000, which is basically would cut home values in half. And I don't know anyone who would sign up for that option, because a lot of people's retirement wealth is tied to their home's wealth. Or wages would need to increase by $93,400 a year, or nearly double what the average wages are in Canada. Either of those options, they don't necessarily sound possible or completely desirable to everybody, but that's putting it a little bit too simplistically. But it does show the size of the gap between attainable, affordable housing and what the current market is providing. Well, Canada used to develop upwards of 20,000 units of social housing per year, where rents were affordable, and often a quarter of those units came with a form of rental assistance to support lower income households, so that no one was paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. Those 20,000 units per year represented between 20 to 25% of all rental housing developed on an annual basis for most of the 70s and 80s. This more or less stopped due to massive government cuts in social programs in the early 90s, and we're really paying the price for this today. It's getting worse. We're also seeing a massive sell-off of private affordable rental housing in Canada. Research from Steve Pomeroy tells us that between 2011 and 2016, the number of private rental housing units affordable to households earning less than $30,000 per year declined by 320,000 units. And that trend is continuing, and these units are disappearing through gentrification and redevelopment. So today, for every 1 unit of affordable housing that's developed with government assistance, 15 are lost due to this gentrification, redevelopment, and financialization of housing. So really, we do need to, and it should be, we must absolutely face the twin crises of massive inequality in Canada and the climate crisis. One of the biggest areas of inequality in Canada are the disparities in housing outcomes. And if we're to really support the welfare of current and future younger generations, we need a more equitable and fair affordable housing system. So I just wanted to lay out the size of the challenge that we're dealing with, and invite others to think about how you can add your voice to this issue, because at the Co-op Housing Federation of Canada, we're just one voice, one organization. We're a pretty strong voice because we mobilize the grassroots of 250,000 people living in housing cooperatives. But the problem is still extremely large. The gap is enormous, and we need a lot more voices and a lot more players to help close that gap.
Hey, thanks all. There's a ton of activity in the chat, which is great. Please let me know if I'm cutting out. I think that it's a good time to pivot into a conversation with the participants, questions that the participants have, and possibly even getting a bit of feedback. I know that with 51 participants, it can be a lot of people. So we'll do our best to manage that. I wanted to note two themes that I saw in the chat. One was the sort of professional and the grassroots. And I know that we at CEC chose as our thematic goal for the year, celebrate difference, foster solidarity. Because to me, that's one, I work in the credit union system. I feel that tension often between a sort of managerial culture as well as a grassroots culture. And that the two sometimes come into conflict, and finding ways to understand the worldviews of people who hold sort of different approaches, and actually understand the other side, and be able to somehow find solidarity in that. And so I think that that's just a really interesting tension, and one that we could dwell a lot more on in the co-op sector generally. I also, there's some conversation about starting young with telling the co-op story and involving youth. This is something I'm really excited about. I recently, well, it's very soon to come out, wrote a kids book explaining credit unions. So it's meant for 6 to 8-year-olds, about a bee who's trying to figure out where to keep her honey, and ultimately finds the hive, which the bees made themselves, and yada yada. So that's going to be coming out at the coming months, ideally. That was a project I did at my last credit union, at Unity Credit Union. I really do believe that it is important that we're telling the story early and in unique and diverse ways. Like, there's no reason that there shouldn't be a Broadway play about co-ops, other than we just haven't done it, you know? So yeah, just a couple of themes that I sort of noted there that I think are really fascinating. But there's a lot of conversations. Sort of the name of the kids' book is "Where Should I Keep My Honey?" So I think that if you Google it, you will find it, but it's not actually out as of yet. So this is a good example of the sort of corporate world. I Googled it. So we're working with a publisher, Googled it and found it on Amazon, but like, we didn't put it on Amazon. So, and also there aren't copies yet. So like, the machine is at work. But anyway, where should I keep my honey? I don't know where we should start with these many questions. So maybe I will toss to Sarah, because I think that.
Can I jump in, Josh?
Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to say, sometimes when I attend webinars, I think, wow, the conversation was so rich, and yet I can't think of something tangible that I can start today. And so I sort of thought from that lens ahead of time and thought, what are some tangible ideas that I think lots of people came here with? You know, how is it? I come with a commitment that we, you know, empower the younger generation to see themselves in co-ops and to be active in co-ops. And so how do I do it? So I generated a little list that maybe some of this will speak to folks. So having a direct and specific invitation for young people to come to meetings and also to speak or be front of room at meetings, and not always just speaking as the youth, as the person representing all youth, because there's no diversity, but also acknowledging their expertise, but really asking ourselves, you know, are there young people, are there folks of color, are there BIPOC folks who can also be front of room, so that we can allow more people to see themselves in what we do. That made a big difference for me. Getting those personal invitations and being seen as valuable early on really gave me a hunger to want to be more involved. Creating spaces for young people to exchange together, like having a social within a larger gathering, as well as being invited in a meaningful way into larger initiatives. Hiring them. I mean, keeping in mind that a lot of younger people these days are digital natives. They were born into knowing how to use technology as early as they knew how to read a book. And so hiring folks, that's just one area of natural expertise for a lot of young folks typically, but to have them on within our organizations to speak to young folks outside of our organizations is a nice parallel. Creating space for entrepreneurship. So within our organizations, creating spaces where young folks who are hungry to innovate and to try something new and to push tradition and so forth, creating space for that within our organizations. Mentorship, Tim mentioned it earlier. really critical for people feeling capable, supported. We all have imposter syndrome, as old as we may be, young folks really have it. So having the support through mentorship can be a help. Internships, participate in programs like CYL is both amazing for your staff as well as for young people being supported and have a personal connection to organizations. Offering products and services with young people in mind, ensuring there's a youth lens in governance and nominations process, making sure our communications and marketing show people of different backgrounds, encouraging young people in our organizations to build affinities to the sector. And these are the ways that I've seen in my couple of decades now in the sector, the way that people build loyalty and affinity in the co-op sector is sending them to wider sector events so they see that they're part of something bigger, supporting them to be educated in lots of different ways, encouraging them to volunteer through something like the cooperative youth leadership programs or the co-op development of Foundation of Canada, like doing international development work when that kind of thing is possible again in an exchange kind of way. Making sure that your onboarding process is inspiring and contextualizes your organization, the wider co-op economy. And lastly, creating organizational goals and a budget with youth engagement in mind. So it sort of can't be meaningfully on the side of someone's desk. That's sort of an oxymoron. So making sure that that's baked into what you consider to be critical to your organization, that you've put a level of effort and resources toward it.
That's a great list. I hope I can go back. I'm going to go back and when I read or watch the video of this webinar, Aaron, and write down your list. It's fantastic.
I'll put it into the chat right now. It's my bullet notes, but at least you'll be able to see it.
Well, I will ask that if anyone has some other questions that they would like us to particularly address. I feel like maybe as I'm thinking back, we might have missed a question from Tara. There might be others, but there are other questions that you'd like to address, or if there's a particular contribution that you would like to make to the conversation, add a note in the Q&A, or I believe you can also raise your hand and we should be able to, I might be speaking out of turn here, Sarah, I apologize. I'm not the organizer, so if I'm wrong, let me know. But I think that we can also allow participants to be unmuted and contribute that way if anyone wants to raise their hand to add something.
Yeah, so if any of you as attendees want to talk, just raise your hand or put a note in the text box in the chat box, and I can unmute you so that you're able to talk directly to us. So if that's something that would work for you guys, the other option is also you can type your questions into the question and answer thing. That keeps the questions a little more separate from the chat, and we'll make sure that we're answering them.
Thanks for listening to us talk on and on. I hope that there's some value. Well, I know there's value from Sarah, Tim, and Aaron, and Eva, but I've also been yammering on.
I have a question for folks who are here, and that is, it came up really early in the chat and has come up ongoing, but the question of diversity, equity, inclusion, considering intersectionality, the involvement of BIPOC folks and the leadership roles of our cooperatives and the wider system. So I wanted to put that back to the folks on the line today to say, in terms of how you meaningfully engage in that work in your co-op or in the sector, any of the musings or even concrete initiatives, I would love to hear some of that or see it in the chat.
So I am seeing a question in the chat for you. Oh, Lori raised her hand. I will open that to her. Where did you go, Lori? One moment, sorry. Technology is great until you don't know how to use it. There you go, Lori. You should be able to talk now. Oh,
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now. Perfect.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say this is a really awesome initiative, having this session about youth. I'm actually working with Wendy Keats in New Brunswick around, she has a youth partnership initiative that's specifically around increasing co-op knowledge amongst youth and amongst a very diverse group of youth. And I also work with a group in Halifax that is involved in the African Nova Scotian community. So that's why I was asking some questions. I'd just seen Jessica Gordon Nemhard speak at the CWCF AGM on Friday, which she has some very concrete suggestions for BIPOC change to happen within the cooperative movement. But in terms of in terms of concrete ways of doing all these things, I think that's the key. And I was really happy to see some very concrete ideas in the chat. One of the things I've been talking with Karen Miner at SMU about is how we create more culturally relevant pedagogy so that people not only see themselves, but literally we create more Afrocentric or culturally appropriate learning opportunities. The other thing I was going to say, I think it's really critical that there work integrated learning opportunities. And that's not just for people BIPOC, but also for youth, so that, and that we encourage government. And I would also encourage, you know, some people here may know of CEDNET, the Canadian Community Economic Development Network, which I've been involved with for a long time. And connecting and creating ways to work together and collaborate together to increase pressure on government, to give money to organizations that already exist, that are already doing this work, and to increase this work and to work more closely with equity-seeking groups and groups that are being seriously affected by COVID, I think is really important as well. So whatever umbrellas, whatever ways we can come together. I'm still learning about the cooperative movement, even though I've founded a few nonprofit ones, but I definitely think it's really important to not necessarily remind the government of their mistakes with the WE charity, but to offer an alternative solution. And I just wanted to really reiterate the point that it needs to be work integrated learning opportunities so that youth can earn, make a living while they're learning about cooperatives. I think is really important too. Thanks.
Laura, you make so many good points. And just to circle back to something that came up in one of our recent trainings, someone said, you know, it's one thing to create volunteer opportunities for folks, you know, to say your voice is welcome at the table. We want you here. We think it's important. But, you know, if for some people that is a barrier for them because they need to use that time to be making money for themselves and their families, or they need to pay for childcare in order to be able to volunteer. Like there's all the, and that's where I think the lens of intersectionality comes back to that. When we make these practices, it's one thing to say, you know, we want to invite people to the table, but it's another to say we want to create access in a way that is truly going to work for people in their individual experience too.
Okay, we've got a raised hand. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, from Chi. Apologies if that's wrong. I'm gonna let you speak in just a sec. Give me 2 seconds. There you are. You should be able to speak now.
Thank you. I had a short comment that I'm calling in from the Community Economies Lab from the University of Toronto. We are working with a bunch of different CLT projects with Little Jamaica and with Friends of Chinatown in Toronto. and yeah, are super inspired by a lot of social justice co-ops that have come about and other conversions from community arts programs. And the experience of going through this just to like witness and offer as examples is still an uphill battle when so much of the knowledge, which is a form of capital in the cooperative sector, is held by folks who don't share the same level of imagination that I feel that a new generation of cooperatives are really bringing to the table. An example is that Value Co-op in Vancouver, for example, they have a co-op bylaw that allows for compensation for emotional labor. When folks in their co-op that are racialized have to do work to educate other members that are white. There are white caucuses that ensure diversity as an ongoing training, and anti-oppressive values continue to be ingrained in the DNA of the structure. I know that other groups that we've advised, when they contact co-op developers and they want to put in really progressive ideas as part of their bylaws, it confuses certain lawyers, it confuses certain accountants who aren't sure how to give them advice on best how to move forward. And these were they had real impacts in how people felt discouraged in projects that we learned ultimately did not move forward because they thought that it wasn't possible. And in fact, it isn't. Like really, you could hire a lawyer to write bylaws however you want, and not the other way around. So really thinking about how we could tackle that, because it's definitely a systemic issue and a barrier.
Thank you so much for that. That's like a super valuable contribution as well.
I'm conscious of time. We had 1 o'clock here, 5 minutes from now, wherever you are, as an ending point. I don't want to cut off conversation, but I also do want to be cognizant that people may have other commitments. Full disclosure, myself being one of them. But I do want to welcome final questions or thoughts as we end. And I suppose, Sarah, though some people may have to leave, is there a hard cutoff for Zoom? Is there any reason that those who'd like to stay and chat further can't?
As far as I know, I don't think we have a hard end date. I think we can keep going with conversation, but of course, being respectful to our panelists' time. If Aaron or Tim, you have to leave, as well as any of our audience members, or Josh, if you have to leave, because I know you're at work, that's totally okay and totally understandable. But we will, try and keep the conversation going, if that is a possibility.
Okay. Well, I want to say a big thank you to Sarah and to Tristan for their work in organizing. A big thanks to Tim and Aaron for being with us, as well as Eva for the time she was able to. Thanks to all participants for whether you added comments and questions or whether you just sort of were quietly absorbing the conversation. Thank you for being here. I myself am going to exit, and if anyone else needs to, that's understandable. And if you're able to stay and chat longer, please do. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for your time and contributions.
And there was a few questions in the chat. I believe Grace, who's CMC's communications person, has recorded this webinar, and I think that it will be made available afterwards. And I can save the chat after we're all done, so that can be made available as well, with all of the fantastic resources that everyone has shared, and the really great ideas. I can speak for, I think, everyone and say that I'm so excited to see this level of involvement from the audience. Your ideas, your input, your questions have been fantastic. It's been really, really exciting to see the engagement that we've had. So I really appreciate that as well from you, our wonderful attendees. Is there any like last minute questions or anything? Anything that anyone would like to talk about before we go? Alrighty, I'm not seeing any. Oh, wait, there is a little blurb in the chat. Oh, it was Aaron.
I always have things to say.
Yes, I have so many great resources.
Yeah, there's a lot of continuing on these kinds of conversations. We try to do a webinar every month where we advance some of this thinking. And so we have 2 coming up on Indigenous rights and inclusion in co-ops. And then in the new year on the beyond Rochdale history of co-ops. And also there's been a really a global study on youth engagement in cooperatives. I meant to mention this earlier, by the ICA and the European Union. And that's getting published in January, and we're doing a feature on it shortly thereafter with researchers from that study. So I think folks on the line would love to check that out.
Yeah, I love that. I think that the more we can learn, the better we'll be, right? I would really quickly like to speak. There was a question about youth and governance, and what I would say to that is like, don't be afraid to let youth on your boards, let youth on your committees, hire youth as a part of your staff. I was a committee chair at 14 years old in my co-op, which sounds bonkers, but without having that sort of freedom to be that as a 14-year-old, I don't think I would have been nearly as involved in my co-op. I was on my board at 18 and then involved provincially and nationally shortly after that. And encouraging youth to be involved, encouraging youth to get involved with your co-op from a young age is so important. Don't be afraid of the fact that they're not qualified on paper. Young people have a lot of really unique ideas to contribute. They have a lot of passion and they have a huge amount of energy. I don't know where my energy went, but when I was 14, I did so much stuff. It was crazy. So definitely get those youth involved. Don't be afraid to have them as a part of your governance, to involve them in processes, to have them contributing at your annual general meetings. You know, if you have to put a letter around to youth that are members of your cooperative, or even to your cooperative members saying, hey, here's an opportunity for your kids to get involved, even if they're not old enough yet to be members themselves. It's very important to building a sustainable future for our co-ops, to involving youth, and to seeing them grow into these governance roles that we have for them. Alrighty, and with that, I think we're losing quite a bit of participants. We're down to 20 now. So I think we will close it off for today. Thank you so much again, everybody. We really appreciate you coming. Thanks, huge thanks to Tim and Aaron. Huge thanks to our audience and attendees who contributed so much. And don't forget to check out our organizations. Well, I think we're going to send around a document sometime after this to our attendees with a lot of this stuff compiled. And yeah, thank you so much. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Annie. Great. So wonderful. All right. Thank you, Sarah. That went awesome.
Yeah, it was really good. Thank you.
And thanks, Grace. Okay, I am. I'll see you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.